ready? This video marks the next phase of your ministerial process. In 2015, Zion gathered everyone who felt called to minister. Now we're moving from assembling and fielding occasional service opportunities to organizing and providing regular service. So I asked, are you ready? And the natural question is, ready for what? I want to know, are you really ready to minister? Because in order for us to do this job, the ministerial assignment, you have to really know what that term means. And to minister, I'll say it again, but I want to slow it down for effect. And I want you to focus on the first part of the word, minister. The term means minus or less. And so I don't care how many times I say it, it's hard to grasp because meaning is often colored by our pre-understanding. Ministering requires a level of broken wholeness. You have to be broken enough to depend on God and then whole enough to carry others. See, I'm convinced that many people minister for the exact opposite reason. You know, when you think of minister, many look at it as a means of becoming more, not less. But to be a minister is distinctly different from being called to minister. Becoming a minister for some means completeness or giving significance, identity, status. In the same way people become physicians because of the associated prestige that comes with that call. But the call to minister literally empties you. Zion and the Lord are looking for people who are ready to empty themselves and not individuals who want to be a minister. This says, have this mind among yourselves, which is in Christ Jesus, who though he was in the form of God, did not see equality with God something to be grasped, but he emptied himself, taking the form of a servant and being born in the likeness of men. In Christian theology, the term emptied is the Greek word kenosis. This term means emptiness. It is the self-emptying of one's will and becoming entirely receptive to God's divine will. And so with that in mind, this next phase will help us sort through our team and identify those who are ready to empty themselves from those who are not. So ministering is emptying. But then there's another word I want you to grab hold of. I want you to adopt this. It is ambiguity. Some get frustrated and check out of the process when there is a lack of clarity, when there are no steps and there's vagueness. There is a sense of security when every step is mapped out and measured. But ministry requires you to embrace the unpredictable and the ambiguous. And when you think about it, John 21 paints a perfect picture of this, of a minister's tension. Prior to Christ's death, he told his disciples over and over again, I must suffer and die. But you know, it's hard to believe. And so he never gave an exact date. There weren't a lot of details. And just like that, before they knew it, Christ died. And if that wasn't enough, he rose. And then he goes to his head disciple, Peter, who ironically dropped out of the ministry process due to some level of ambiguity. See, when ministry doesn't match your assumptions, by the way, there is a tendency to walk away. Jesus comes to Peter and he challenges him. He says, listen, I want you to follow my example and feed my sheep. I want you to love me and feed my sheep. You see, as soon as Jesus starts telling Peter about what the next level of ministry is going to cost him, Peter immediately gets sidetracked and starts worrying about the future, the ministry process for the other disciple named John. How will his be the same as mine? Now, I want you to zero in on Christ's response because it provides a framework for how to handle ambiguity in our process. Jesus says, if I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? As for you, follow me. Now, keep in mind that this isn't new information. This is the exact same thing Jesus tells Peter when they first met, when he first called them. In other words, don't worry about the next step. Keep doing the last thing I told you to do and do it well. See, you handle ambiguity by using slow seasons to aggressively prepare for what's going to come next. Think about it. As soon as Jesus wasn't actively pushing the disciples, Peter disengages from the process and goes back to fishing. But Christ comes to Peter and says, it's your time. You're up. See, that's how it works. Before you know it, you have more in you than you can imagine. So don't worry about what's next. Don't worry about when there will be a licensing service. Don't worry about, what are you going to do next in ministering. Just focus on sharing Christ and making disciples. Focus on preparing your spiritual maturity. Focus on how to better use your time in worship. See, the process doesn't make a minister. The process reveals one. And ironically, Peter's process was different than John's. I want you to hang on to the words. What is that to you? When disciples wanted to know, Jesus, when are you coming back? Here's another statement that Jesus gives. He says, it's not for you to know the times of the season that the Father has fixed by his own authority. And see, you can rest assured if God has called you, then he plans to use you. And you're simply in a process to determine if you're called to minister at Zion. So let's take a moment now and let's define a Zion minister in training. Actually, there are two designations for the term or the acronym M.I.T. There is a minister in training, and then there is a minister in transition. The minister in training has little to no ministry experience, whereas the minister in transition has ministry experience, but they lack Zion's DNA. That's huge, because when people transfer from other ministries with ministerial background, it's akin to an organ transplant. Just because the organ is placed in the body, it doesn't mean that it fits. The chemistry of the recipient must match the chemistry of the donor. There is a rigorous process of assimilation in medicine to ensure that the organ works properly in that body. Sometimes people will transfer from one ministry with drama and then transfer that drama into a new ministry. As a side note, that's why it's so important that whenever you leave anything, that you do it graciously. Others come to Zion expecting ministry to be done the same way it was in their previous church. I want to let you know, ironically, one of the biggest reasons a person may be declined in this process is because you're simply not a good fit for Zion. Now, keeping what I just said in mind, the goal of this video meeting is to address three areas: your ministerial process, your ministerial role, and your expectations, and what you can expect from us. Now, let's get into the process. First off, I had to rethink a very important question. Most, if not explicitly, at least unconsciously, have asked this question: what must I do to become a Zion minister? So I created a handout, and we had a meeting and requirements, but actually, you don't do anything to become a Zion minister, because this process is not academic, it's prophetic. I want you to look at how God calls Samuel. Samuel hears the call of God. He runs to his pastor, Eli. But Eli says, I didn't call you. And this happens again. But once Eli was sure who it was that was calling, in 1 Samuel chapter 3, verse 9, he says, go and lie down. And again, if someone calls you again, he says, say, speak, Lord, your servant is listening. See, Samuel did two things. First, he stayed close enough for Eli to realize his calling. And then secondly, he stayed in the process long enough to know the difference between Eli's voice and God's call. Some of us are still responding to Eli's call. So you came to someone and you said, I prayed for you. And they say, I want to let you know, see, you got a call on your life and you've been running from that call. What I think is funny is the call seems like it only works when it's in church. You don't hear the call in relationships or on your job or at the gym. Well, see, when God calls, the comfort of sleep is disrupted. You hear the call when nobody tells you that you're called. You don't need a big assignment because the call of God never gets deeper than God speaks and you respond. See, it's not a call to be, but a call to action. Eli says, when someone calls, you listen and then say. He doesn't tell Samuel, after you hear someone call, go be. He says, no, when you hear the call, go do. The prophetic call is built on trust and obedience and faithfulness. The academic call is based on works and task completion. Well, I want you to understand that this process, again, does not make you a minister. The process reveals the minister that's in you. So the key is stay close, be in church, be available, stay in the process, operate under the leadership of Zion, and you can trust that God will not only use your gifts, they will not only make room for you, but your calling will be made clear. Too many people wait for something to be given for them to do, rather than staying close enough to see the need, learn, and then address the need. See, that's how purpose is identified. The ministerial function precedes the ministerial designation. Our process is threefold. It's to equip you, to examine you, and to expose you. The process is organized based on two components, classwork and field work. See, part of the problem is that we've created the wrong kind of ministers because our process does not actually reflect or examine what it is a minister really is from a biblical perspective. See, your theological and doctrinal alignment is crucial. Everything you are comes out of that. And so that's why we ask everybody to go through our ministerial orientation. We have classwork that allows you to examine what it is you believe, because your belief system will reflect your behavior. This is why Paul tells Timothy, watch your life and your doctrine closely. Persevere in them, because if you do, you will save yourself and your hearers. See, classwork is offered through Glenarden's Institutes, as well as our online training. That's biblicaltraining.org. And for ministers in transition, we have a slightly different process in that there's an interview and a profile that we use to figure out what is your involvement in Zion, what is the general sense of your doctrinal beliefs, and we use this to better assess where we can insert you in our process. Your coursework is directly related to what you're going to be doing. And so we require everybody to take the minister's orientation, which provides an overview of the heart and spirit of a minister. It also provides a convenient place to assess the authenticity of your call. Homiletics equips you for presenting biblical truth for teaching. Expository preaching, another class we ask you to take, is not just about preaching. Although some may minister through the preaching capacity, it really is about training you to unearth God's vast riches as you study his word. It also helps you as a minister to distinguish between biblical preaching and motivational speaking. This will allow you, the minister, to provide biblical insight to those we serve. Another aspect of your classwork is biblical counseling. We want you to get a basic introduction into the art and the science of listening, and then to be able to extend biblical counseling using a systematic approach. Another class is how to study the Bible. This provides a basic instruction for inductive Bible study, how to move from observation to application within biblical context. Church doctrine is another one. It's designed to orient the minister to an orthodox biblical worldview. This is all about understanding what was passed down? What have Christians believed from the start that was passed from Christ on to the apostles? We not only want our ministers to know what they believe, but why they believe it. And so all of these courses come together to prepare you for our final 3 training elements, one of which is relational discipleship, which is all about teaching people how to follow Christ with their lifestyle and through biblical truth. The second of that 3 essential trainings is conversational evangelism. This training focuses on sharing Christ through everyday interaction. And then finally, we want to take ministers through a survey of ecumenical duties that pertain to the minister. We want you to have a first-hand experience with baptisms and get some understanding of how weddings work and the altar call. See, this process is self-paced. Some of you may be ready sooner than others, which is why we don't force everyone into the same timeline. Now, let's move on to your field experience. Your field experience is most vital because it accomplishes 2 important goals. It first allows the Christian community to bear witness to God's call on your life. And then secondly, it allows us to objectively examine and assimilate you into Zion's culture. We're listening and getting feedback as you move about on Sundays. Now let's discuss your role. You have 5 primary service areas. And number 1 is your post-service prayer on Sunday. Following each service, we extend prayer to all of our attendees. People are invited to experience prayer or have us pray for them after the close of service. It's simple. We want you to ask their name, get a prayer request, and then assess the need. Do we need to follow up with them beyond Sunday? You'll have a card with the word Zion Next on there. If they text the word Zion Next to 51555, we have their name in a database. Makes it easy for you to follow up. The second of your service duties are the salvation altar call. After a message, the preacher may extend an invitation for someone to receive Christ. We're going to ask you to take them back to the designated room. You'll play a 10-minute video on what it means to have a relationship with Jesus Christ. And then at the close, you again will collect information from those who are in that room by having them text Zion Next to 51555. You will have these cards available. You can put your name on it, but you can also put that information into your phone to make it easier for them. The other aspect of the big 3 is discipleship. Now, this is the beauty of what you're called to do, especially those who are called to teach, because discipleship is all about providing a consistent example, challenging truth, and constant accountability. This is a game changer because discipleship is essentially practice, it's repetition, it's exercise, and this is what's needed for growth. See, the problem in traditional church, or in church in general, is that our model for discipleship is about driving to a building, sitting in a class, which creates a natural obstacle to our overall goal, which is to get people to grow. So people end up skipping this, and they remain spiritual infants. According to Ephesians chapter 4, verse 14, they're tossed to and fro. And then they are not able to be mature, but they're like children. If they can get discipled, though, they'll be anchored and won't be blown around by every new teaching. You see, without discipleship, people can sit on the back row of Zion for years and never grow beyond an infant. So we're going to ask you to learn how to coach. We're going to use a training called First Steps. And we just simply want you to make a follow-up call once they express interest. Send a training video. Follow up with an answer guide and field questions, and then hold the trainee accountable to doing 7 repetitions or 7 training sessions. By accountable, I mean send them a text, email, a phone call, whatever you need to do to keep them on track. Asking them, did you complete your training? And then, as I said, make yourself available to field questions that they may have. Finally, you finish off by encouraging them to get involved in small group community. Now, your fourth area of responsibility or service is the extended sanctuary service. You will serve on a schedule to enhance the quality of service in our extended sanctuaries. This is so needed right now. To make that experience great, we're going to ask you to not only welcome guests, but to make guests feel welcome. There is a distinction. Welcoming guests is accomplished through a verbal communication. For example, good morning and welcome to Zion, right? But making a guest feel welcome involves creating an experience for the guest that says, I had you in mind before you even got here. This involves intentional preparation and attention to detail. It's, can I assist you? Would you like some water? It's praying over the sanctuary before they arrive. And then it's remembering their name when you see them again. Here is an easy way to remember the extended sanctuary responsibilities. Prepare your presence, prayer, and praise. Provide a warm presence, a smile, a handshake. Get names and remember the guests. Pray for them. Pray for the attendees at the end of the service. This extends the altar even into our extended sanctuary. Praise. Allow your genuine celebration of Christ and worship to add value to the environment. You are the worship leader. As you worship Christ, it gives others a level of comfort to do the same. And then we want you to be equipped to give directions and field questions. Imagine being new to Zion and wanting to know, well, how do I become a member? Or what about baby dedication? How about baptism? We want to empower ministers in training or in transition to exercise their leadership gifts through being able to direct those who come into the extended sanctuaries. Your fifth area of service is frontline and special events. See, there are some service team holes on our campus. When people sign up to serve, they tend to think convenience before sacrifice. This can leave critical areas of service that are neglected. We never want convenience to be the first option for a Zion minister. So we're going to invite you to sacrifice. We want you all to lead in sacrificial service. We want you to cover service gaps on the campus and step up until we're able to build manpower. You may even be involved with coaching some of the serving teams. So this is exciting for me because I can really see you guys doing and ladies doing an incredible job. So now let's talk about expectations. Service expectations revolve around three important activities. Accountability. This is measured by your responsiveness to service requests, emails, building community, and scheduling. Another aspect of expectations is teachability. This is defined by the ministerial team members' engagement in our preparation process. Are you doing coursework and field work? Are you open to feedback and correction? A third component is service ability. Are you effective and functional in the ministerial capacity? So this is crucial. Just because you are available doesn't mean that you're skilled to do this. And this is part of our responsibility. So in the next couple of weeks, we're going to assign some training and schedule some duties so that you can get prepared specifically for the next assignments we're going to have you do. This is what we mean by serviceability. So we don't want people freestyling. We want you to be able to handle the prescribed training. We don't want people operating out of order. We don't want people doing too much because both extremes can compromise the quality of service. So we've dealt with the process. We've dealt with responsibilities. We've talked a little about expectations. Now I want to talk a little bit more about qualification or qualifying the called. Let's look at Luke chapter 6, verses 13 through 16. It reads, in these days, he went out to the mountain to pray. And all night he continued in prayer to God. And when day came, he called his disciples and chose from them 12. Wow. Whom he named apostles, Simon, who he named Peter, and Andrew, his brother, and James and John, and Philip and Bartholomew, and Matthew and Thomas, and James, the son of Alphaeus, and Simon, who was called the Zealot, and Judas, the son of James, and Judas Iscariot, who became a traitor. Now, he called and he chose. The above passage is our philosophy for defining our M.I.T. members. Jesus spent all night. He could have called anyone, and he could have chosen everyone, but he chose 12, not because they were better, but because the called were also chosen. There certainly could have been a better pick than, in my opinion, than Judas, but God even had a purpose for Judas. See, many are called, but few are chosen. And if everything, and I want to say this, everything isn't for everybody. Some are called, but they don't answer. Others answer even when they're not called. And somehow, in all of this, God still allows all things to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose. That's the key. Because some may be called to minister at Zion, and some are not called. Some are not called to ministry at all. Others are called to a non-traditional ministry. Others are called to minister at another church. I say this to say that everyone who signed up for this process will not be chosen to serve at Zion. MITs must be willing to accept that entry into the process does not necessitate or guarantee ministerial status. MITs can expect regularly scheduled checkpoints that may conclude with the dismissal from this process. It will be very similar to this NFL camp process. I want you to take a look at this.
Hey, you kind of up and down, we got to get it to where it's just a little small wave where the consistency level is more consistent. And before you become great, which I think you have the ability to be, you got these waves got to be a lot smaller. Okay, and that's probably why you're being traded. I'm just being transparent with you. I want you to know why it hasn't worked for us here. I think the world of you as a person. And I appreciate you busting here as the Miami Dolphin the last 3 years. And I know you'll do well.
Thanks,
you'll do well, okay?
All right, thank you.
Hey, listen, we've had some ups and downs, but everything's going to be positive, all right? I want you to have a great career,
Thanks.
All right? All right, man. Take care, Bill. All right, man.
Thanks, man.
See you, Bill.
All right.
Hey, you can look at this two ways, too. It can be a very good positive for you. All right, so make it a positive, all right?
Okay.
All right, man. I care about you, bud. Be sure and call the coach back now.
Okay.
Now, clearly, the guy is talented. You know what I love most? I love his attitude. Honestly, sometimes earthly coaches and pastors may get it wrong. But it would be poor stewardship to carry more people on a team than you're going to actually use. It would also be selfish because other teams could greatly benefit from God's gift in you. But I want to say that your response to this part of our process is crucial. You don't have to worry because God has a way of getting you on the field of ministry because he owns the team and he always gets who he wants. And he also gets it right all the time, and he will do this in his time. As I noted earlier, the primary reason for a person not being a part of this process may be graciously dismissed from the process is simply because it's not a good fit. And fit is all about the right time. Sometimes the answer is not never. Sometimes it's just not now. Another aspect of fit is culture. Does your God-ordained background fit the culture of this team? You can unconsciously try to make Zion be what it's not designed to be and find yourself frustrated because we don't have an altar call after every sermon or don't use white gloves during communion. But then there's also the issue of right DNA and gifting. Has God is truly, he's given all of his children gifts, but not all gifts are the same. See, Peter was an apostle to the Jews. His ministry was about targeting them. Well, Paul was an apostle to the Gentiles. See, we all are part of the universal church in the body of Christ, but not everyone is called to minister at Zion. I just want you to let that resonate. Let's look at some other reasons you may not be a fit to minister in this ministry context. One is ordination. Zion typically ordains ministers to the gospel ministry, those who are going to either be on full-time ministry or plant a church. So this process is ideally about licensing a minister, someone who will operate within the local assembly and under the authority of the local church. Another challenge for some of you may be preaching opportunities. Although Zion has trained, ordained, and opened the pulpit to women preachers, much of the teaching and preaching has been primarily conducted by men. I want to emphasize that the big issue isn't doctrinal. It isn't gender bias. One of the burdens of our ministry is to reach men. And although God has richly blessed the church with some incredibly gifted women, it's no secret that the church culture is subject to being overly feminized, and we can unintentionally emasculate the men that God has called us to reach. As a matter of fact, regardless of gender, there is very little to no opportunity for preaching from the stage at Zion. Honestly, for those who have a preaching, teaching gift, I believe the greatest and most underutilized opportunity, you want to hear me say it 1,000 times, is discipling others, to teach learners. So many believers suffer from spiritual atrophy because they live on sermons. But a young believer cannot properly develop without trainers. And this is the golden opportunity for a Zion minister. You will get the opportunity to exercise your gift, but on a smaller stage. Nonetheless, your impact will be just as significant. So here are some other reasons we may not choose you to continue in this process. Just want you to keep this in mind. That's going to sound familiar. It's the DNA of Zion, but I want to explain what I mean. It's a love for Christ, a love for the lost, and a clear anointing to connect with the people that you're called to serve. By DNA, we also mean, are you flexible? Can you operate without structure? Humility. Can you do things that are little, that are beneath you? Can you be effective and at the same time not seen? Integrity is another aspect of this DNA. Can we trust your word and your lifestyle that they would be favorable in reflecting Christ in Zion? Speaking of lifestyle, remember that being a Zion minister will also make you more visible, higher expectations and responsibility. And so while we're all in works in progress, we are all graciously blessed, even though we're a mess. You are a brand ambassador. Whether you like it or not, people will begin to associate what you do with who you represent. We don't need to get deep because Subway isn't a church, but they just dismissed Jared, the official face of their advertisement, over questionable behavior. The NFL and NBA aren't churches, but they fine players for domestic violence and for lifestyle issues. Why? Because they don't want to damage the brand. Zion has a reputation, and Christ paid a high price for your sins. You are covered, but this role requires functional maturity. And by functional, I mean you can't just possess Bible knowledge. You have to practice biblical values. If someone on your job took you to court for your lifestyle, would there be enough evidence to convict you of being a devoted follower of Jesus Christ? See, everything from what you put on Facebook to who you date, all of that reflects something about you as well as the brand you represent. which is why James chapter 3, verse 1 gives us a really powerful warning. Dear brothers and sisters, not many of you should become teachers in the church, because we who teach will be judged more strictly. And look at what Paul tells Timothy in 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 5 through 7. If anyone does not know how to manage his own family, how can he take care of God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he may become conceited and fall under the same judgment as the devil. He must also have a good reputation with outsiders, so that he will not fall into disgrace and into the devil's trap. Now, while this may be applicable contextually to elders, I think it's important as well for ministers to understand this applies to them. This has some relevant application. So think twice about how you conduct yourself in public. Even if you feel like it's okay to drink, understand that you don't want your liberty to be a stumbling block for somebody else. Understand that you're going to be challenged in the parking lot, tempted to cuss somebody out 10 times more than someone else, just to see whether or not you're going to respond properly. Thinking of that.
I know damn well that you just, excuse me. Lady, I know damn well you saw me getting ready to take this spot.
I saw you. I took it.
Why don't you move your little red car before I move it for you? Okay, go on in the store. Go on in the store. Just walk off. Just walk off like you bad. You bad? You bad? Okay. Excuse me. I said I was waiting for that spot, lady.
Well, it's my spot now, Grandma.
Lady, look at, lady, let me explain something. Lady, let me explain something to you. Lady, let me explain something to you. Lord have mercy. She gonna make me tell the K and the B off of this Kmart. You back up. I ought to run right into her. Lord help me. I don't want to get in no trouble, Lord. I already. Help me, Jesus. Help me, Lord. You know I'm ready to go drive straight through this glass. That's all right. I'm gonna be. That was my parking spot, and you gonna jump in front of me and take my parking spot?
Are you insane? Put my car down!
Okay, I'm gonna put it down for you.
Old woman, put my car down now!
Okay.
My husband is a police officer, and he is on his way right now!
I ain't scared of no po-po. Call the po-po. Call the po-po.
Now, that's Kmart!
See, what you did in the dark will now be magnified in the light. So if you're not emotionally stable in this season, or you're young in your faith in Christ, or you haven't, what I mean by young, you haven't walked with Christ long enough to have a strong stance in his word, or to have an established worship practice, or you have not put enough time in to have trained someone else and have shared your faith with someone, this is a good time to step back and say, is this really the call for me? Just because we don't choose you to minister in an official capacity, though, doesn't mean that God didn't call. It doesn't mean that you can never serve on the ministerial team. It doesn't mean that you can't continue to serve in some other capacities. It just means that you can't do this specific role. On the flip side, some of you, because you are a great fit for Zion, you have our DNA, and you demonstrate your ministerial acumen is off the charts. We may call you into an official ministerial capacity before you even complete your portfolio. So what we want you to look out for as I conclude is we want you to keep your eyes out for training videos that will equip you for immediate service, and then also look out for a schedule in which we will be calling you to serve. You may also want to understand we're going to be checking on you and inviting some of you to talk about your fit and future in this ministerial process. Well, I am so grateful that we had a chance to talk about roles and the process and expectations. I will also have a frequently asked question guide to accompany this video. I want you to get ready to minister. May the Lord bless you. May he sustain you. And may he use you to extend life to those who enter the doors of Zion. I am so privileged to serve alongside so many of you, and we have some great things in store for those who are called to minister at Zion. God bless, and I'll be connecting with you soon.